Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to do a deep dive on something I think we've all probably experienced at some point, micromanagement. You know, when we first thought about this topic, I thought it was just going to be us kind of venting about annoying bosses. But the source material we looked at actually goes so much deeper than that.
Oh, it does, yeah. It gets into like the psychology of control. Micromanaging isn't always about the work itself.
Oh, okay.
A lot of times it's about the manager's own like insecurities or anxieties or something like that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So, I think everybody wants a little bit of control at work, right?
Right. Healthy control is normal,
Yeah.
but micromanagers, they take it too far.
Yeah.
And it often comes down to this fear of failure. Like they can't trust anyone else to get it right.
Yeah.
There's this concept in psychology called it's called locus of control. And it's this idea that some people just feel like they have to control every single outcome.
So it's not even just about being a perfectionist. It's like deeper than that.
Deeper, much deeper.
Like their whole sense of security is tied to things being done a certain way.
Exactly. And think about how this plays out in a team environment. A manager with that strong need for control can really stifle their team's creativity, their growth.
Right.
They might be constantly second-guessing their decisions, hovering over their shoulders all the time, making them feel like they can't breathe.
Ugh, yeah. I can feel the tension just thinking about that.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of this connection between micromanagers and toxic managers.
Oh, yeah.
Are they two sides of the same coin, you think?
Definitely some overlap there.
Yeah.
Classic toxic leadership traits like narcissism, insecurity, that need to dominate.
Yeah.
It all feeds into that excessive control. It's like they view their team as like an extension of themselves.
Yeah.
Like they're incapable of independent thought or action.
So we've talked about kind of the manager side of this, but what about the impact on the team? This can't be good for morale, can it?
No, it's absolutely detrimental. Studies show that there's a direct link between micromanagement and decreased morale, stifled creativity, and just increased stress levels. People end up, instead of feeling like valued contributors, they start to feel like cogs in a machine. They lose that sense of ownership, that autonomy, and that leads to disengagement.
So it's a lose-lose situation.
Pretty much. The manager's stressed, they're controlling, the team is miserable and unproductive.
Is there any way out of this? Like, can these managers even change?
That's the million-dollar question. It's tough because we're talking about like deep-seated psychological patterns.
Right.
It's not like they can just flip a switch.
So what can you do if you're stuck with a micromanager? I'm sure our listeners like on the edge of their seat right now wanting to know, like, what can I actually do?
Well, rather than trying to change the person, which is probably unlikely, you can focus on managing the situation.
Okay.
And that's where things get a little bit more hopeful.
Okay, good.
Because there are actually some really effective strategies you can use.
Okay, great. Let's get into the toolkit then. What are some strategies that you can use to not only survive, but maybe even thrive under a micromanager?
Well, one of the most powerful things you can do is something called proactive communication.
Okay.
And this isn't about being a micromanager's dream employee and like doing everything they want.
Right.
It's about understanding their anxieties and working with them.
So you're kind of taking away their reasons to micromanage.
Exactly.
I'm picturing giving them regular updates, being super clear about what you're working on, that sort of thing.
Exactly. When you're transparent about your progress, you proactively seek clarification on their expectations, it kind of eases their worry.
Yeah.
And it subtly reinforces that message that like, hey, you're on top of things,
Yeah.
You got this. And it also really helps if you meticulously document your work.
Okay.
Not just for your own records, but also as a way to kind of demonstrate your competence, your thoroughness.
That's a really interesting approach. It's almost like you're speaking their language,
Right.
Appealing to their need for control by showing them that you've got it handled.
It's about meeting them where they are psychologically,
Yeah.
but it's equally crucial to set clear boundaries.
Okay.
And this is where a lot of people really struggle, especially with a manager who's used to, calling all the shots.
Right. How do you do that without rocking the boat too much? Setting those boundaries.
That's a delicate balance for sure. You might not be able to change their behavior overnight, but you can control your own reactions and what you're willing to tolerate.
Okay.
And this might mean, politely but firmly pushing back when they overstep.
Okay, so give us an example. Like, what would that sound like? What would you actually say?
So let's say your micromanager is constantly wanting minute-by-minute updates. You could say something like, I understand you want to stay informed, and I'll definitely provide regular updates at our agreed upon times. But for me to really focus deeply and produce my best work, I need to minimize distractions.
Right.
Can we agree on a system where I reach out with updates at specific intervals unless there's like an urgent issue?
Oh, that's great. That's a great example.
Right.
So you're acknowledging their need for control,
Hmm.
but you're also setting a very clear boundary.
Exactly.
And it's phrased so respectfully, it's not
Yeah.
like you're blaming them or accusing them of anything.
Right.
It's just like, hey, let's find a solution that works for both of us.
Exactly. And sometimes setting boundaries is as simple as learning to say no,
Yeah.
to unreasonable demands,
Yeah.
especially when they're adding like unnecessary stress to your plate or interfering with like your core responsibilities.
This is so important. And I think it's something that so many people struggle with. But ultimately, you have to protect your own time and energy,
Yeah.
right?
You do. You absolutely do. You can't pour from an empty cup.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah. And it leads into another really crucial strategy, focusing on what you can control.
Okay, I like this. Tell me more.
So you can't change your manager's personality, right? So don't waste your energy on wishing they were different.
Yeah.
Instead, focus on your own performance, your own professional development, your own well-being.
So it's about like finding that sense of agency within a situation that feels very like out of your control. I
Yeah,
like that. That's empowering.
exactly, exactly. It's about shifting that mindset, from feeling like a victim to taking ownership of your experience, even in a challenging environment.
This is all great advice.
Hmm.
But what about those times when it gets really tough? Like when the micromanagement is relentless, you're feeling completely drained.
Yeah.
What do you do?
Well, seeking support is essential.
Yeah.
This could be, trusted colleagues, mentors, even a therapist. Sharing your experiences, getting an outside perspective, it can really help you process those feelings and just stay resilient.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned therapy because sometimes you just need that space to vent and process without judgment and to get some tools for coping.
Absolutely. And having a network of like supportive colleagues can make a huge difference too. It's a reminder that you're not alone in this experience.
Yeah.
And it can be incredibly validating to know that other people understand what you're going through.
So we've talked about some like general strategies, but what about those truly toxic micromanagers, like the ones who are not just annoying, but like they create a hostile work environment? Any tips for dealing with those extreme cases?
Yeah, there are some more like advanced techniques for those situations.
Yeah.
One that's gaining a lot of popularity is the gray rock method.
Okay, I've heard of this. Tell me more.
So it's essentially about becoming emotionally unresponsive,
Right.
like a gray rock.
Right.
You don't engage with their drama or their negativity. You keep your interactions brief, factual, and you don't give them the emotional reaction that they kind of feed on.
You're basically taking away their power by not playing their game.
Right.
It seems counterintuitive, but I can see how it would be effective.
It can be surprisingly powerful. And in any case of truly toxic micromanagement, documentation is key.
Yes.
Keep detailed records of your interactions, unreasonable demands, any instances of, bullying or harassment.
Right.
This protects you if you need to like escalate the situation to HR or even seek legal counsel.
Right, because unfortunately you can't always resolve these situations internally.
Right.
Which brings us back to the question that I know a lot of listeners are probably wondering. Is staying under a micromanager ever worth it?
The million-dollar question, right?
Yeah,
And as with most things in life, the answer is it depends.
I figured as much.
Yeah.
So what are some of the factors to consider when making that decision?
You have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. Are you gaining valuable experience despite the challenges? Do you have a strong support system to help you cope? Is the role itself, aligned with your long-term career goals?
So it's about looking at the bigger picture,
Yes.
not just focusing on the immediate discomfort.
Exactly. It's about strategically assessing the situation. So if you're learning and growing, if you have a strong support system, if you can manage the stress without it, impacting your health,
Right.
then it might be worth sticking it out for a while.
But there's a limit, right? Like at what point does it become too much?
Absolutely. If the micromanagement is severely impacting your mental health, career growth, your overall well-being, it's time to rethink the situation.
Yeah.
Your health and happiness should always come first.
That's such an important reminder
Hmm.
because we often, feel this pressure to just tough it out. But sometimes the best thing we can do for ourselves is just to walk away from a toxic situation.
Could not agree more. You deserve to work in an environment where you feel valued, trusted, respected. And if that's not happening, it might be time to explore other opportunities.
It really is. You know what surprised me most getting ready for this is how much psychology is involved. We tend to think of micromanagement as just like an annoying habit,
Right.
but it's so much more than that.
It is. Yeah, it really is. We've talked about like the fear of failure and that need for control.
Right.
But there are other like fascinating aspects too. Some research suggests that certain personality types are actually more prone to micromanaging.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
What kind of personality types are we talking about here?
So think about folks who are like highly conscientious,
Okay.
very detail oriented, maybe even a little perfectionistic.
Yeah.
Those tendencies, while they can be positive, they can tip over into micromanagement if they aren't kept in check. That makes sense. I can see how somebody who's like naturally very detail oriented might struggle to, let go and trust other people to handle things the way they would. And I imagine that stress just like amplifies those tendencies.
Absolutely, yeah. When we're under pressure, our natural tendencies, they get magnified. So a manager who's like, a little bit controlling in general might become a full-blown micromanager when they're faced with like a tight deadline or a high-stakes project.
It's like their anxiety goes into overdrive and that need to control everything just takes over.
Exactly.
And it makes me think about like the impact on their own well-being. I mean, if you're constantly stressed about every little detail, that can't be healthy.
It's not. And it's something we don't talk about enough. Micromanagement isn't just bad for the team, it's bad for the manager too. It leads to burnout, resentment, strained relationships.
So there's like a real self-care aspect to this as well. If you're a manager and, you're prone to micromanaging, like recognizing those patterns and finding healthier ways to cope with stress is crucial.
Yeah, not just for your team's sake, but for your own.
Absolutely. It's all about finding that balance between, holding high standards and trusting your team to do their best work.
Right.
And it's about recognizing that letting go of some of that control can actually lead to better results and just a more positive work environment for everybody.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground here on the micromanagement front. We've gone from understanding the psychology behind it to some practical strategies for both, managing it and avoiding it. Do you have any final words of wisdom you want to leave our listeners with?
Just remember that, micromanagement is a behavior. It's not a personality trait.
Okay.
It's something that can be learned and unlearned.
Right.
And while it might be rooted in those deeper psychological needs, those needs can be addressed
Yeah.
with self-awareness, support, and a willingness to change.
And for those on the receiving end of micromanagement, just remember that you have agency, you can communicate your needs, you can set boundaries, you can advocate for yourself, and if the situation is truly untenable, you always have the option to walk away and find an environment where you can thrive.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And remember, communication is key. Talk to your manager, talk to your colleagues, seek support from mentors or therapists. You don't have to suffer in silence.
We all deserve to work in environments that support our growth and our well-being and our success. And sometimes that means having tough conversations, setting boundaries, making difficult choices.
Absolutely.
But you're not alone in this journey, and by understanding the dynamics at play, we can all work towards creating healthier, more productive work environments for everyone.
Well said.
This has been such a great deep dive into the world of micromanagement. What started as a simple topic really turned out to be so much more.
It really did. I think the biggest takeaway here is that even though micromanagement can be a really challenging experience, there is hope. There are strategies for managing it, there are ways to protect yourself, and there's always the possibility of change.
So to our listener out there who might be grappling with a micromanager right now, remember this. You are not alone, you have options, and you have the power to create a better work experience for yourself.
Exactly. And remember, even the most ingrained behaviors can be shifted with self-awareness, support, and a commitment to growth.
Thank you all for joining us today on this deep dive into the surprisingly intricate world of micromanagement. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and practical strategies for navigating this common workplace challenge. And remember, knowledge is power, and with the right tools and support, you can take control of your experience and create a more positive and fulfilling work life. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and as always, stay empowered.